Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today I'm here with a VR to Moonbaby, his hashtag tarot collector. I watched his video, of course, but I've seen so many, I sort of went down the rabbit hole and watched the responses of a bunch of tarot tubers and was feeling inspired to look at my own collection and see what decks I would use for these prompts, and it was kind of fitting. I'm trying to downsize my collection considerably, so I was going through my decks and it just sort of stood out in my mind after having watched the responses which decks I would pick. So I've got them all lined up and we're going to dig in without any further ado. The first question is my most expensive deck. Now I have a few options. My memory is not so sharp in that I can remember a specific one deck that was astronomically more than the others, but I guess I have a few, and I'll mention why I have a few. So the first I have here is a vintage Thoth deck. This is a Llewellyn edition. This one I believe is one of the ones from the 60s, has the hard sliding box, and these go for a lot on eBay as it is, and that's where I got it. I think I paid a really decent price for it. It wasn't so expensive compared to what I would normally see. This is one of the editions, actually, if I can find it, that has a misprint or a mistake. So I think it's the Eight of Cups is missing a title, and the Eight of Cups is missing a title, and the Ace of Discs is printed upside down. So if I can find those, I will share them, but I think that's part of what made it unique and also what had it be the price that it was. I know that the Llewellyn ones are generally the ones that a lot of people try to look for in terms of vintage Thoth decks, and I saw it at the price it was and felt compelled to go for it. I like collecting vintage Thoth decks especially, so this was one I really wanted. And the idea of a little manufacturing error in a sort of print running to me is really endearing and sweet and something I would kind of want to hold on to. So, okay, so I found the cards with the sort of printing errors. There's the Eight of Cups indolence, and so it doesn't have the number on the top, so that's one thing that's notable about it, whereas of course all of the others are going to have their number right printed on the top. And then for the Ace of Discs, it's hard to tell because the Ace of Discs is somewhat symmetrical from a bunch of angles, so if you didn't know and you weren't looking for it, you might pass it over, but it is printed upside down. The actual image, so on the back, it is the right way, and the title, in accordance with that, is printed properly, but the actual image is flipped upside down. So I really like that. I like how this is just the older editions. There's sort of a changing color tone throughout. It's not consistent. Some are very faded. I guess the ink and how it was applied wasn't so consistent, and then the smell, it just smells like an old library book, which I love. I frequent the library and I look for the old books. I love the smell of old books. So that's one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive. And I know that it's one that goes for quite a bit. So, I just dropped a card. So yes, I know that is one of the most valuable or expensive. And then if I ever went to sell it, I know that's one that can go for quite a bit, but I have no plans to sell it. Now, another deck that was really expensive, and this was the most expensive deck that I bought new that was in print. So the manufacturer and the creator actually sold it for the most, or it took the most money for me to acquire it. And that is the Aurasoma Tarot. I've spoken about this before. I have a review of it, and I also, within that review, speak to some of the issues and the sort of debacle that went down in terms of acquiring this and the issues regarding that. But it was an expensive deck. I believe it was priced just brand new as it is in print, about $100 off of the website, $100 US. And then what really got me was the international shipping. So I knew it was going to be a little bit more, but it was, I think, $75 US to ship internationally, which feels inaccurate and a bit exploitative just because I've shipped a bunch of things internationally. I've purchased many things internationally from the country that this is sent from, and it's never been even half, or it's been maybe close to about half of what that was. But yeah, so the shipping was a lot. And then to have any sort of guidebook, there's no little white book, at least in the newer editions. There is in the older edition, and I have the out-of-print older edition, which came with a little white book, but the newer one doesn't come with that, so you have to get a book to go along with it, and the book was about $30, and it's not like a well-made, really expensive looking book. So all around, just to get this deck to my house with a book to accompany it took about $200. So it was a major investment. It was one I thought about for quite some time. But yeah, it was really expensive. I love the deck. I think it was worth it, but their customer service is not great, or the person, I think the creators are great, but their customer service isn't. And just know that they don't offer the hard boxes anymore. You can't get the bottle backs. So if I were to do it all over again, I probably would have just held out for the vintage version or the older version I found that had the bottle backs, because I spent a lot less on that, and that can go for a lot more because it's out of print. So word to the wise on that one. And then another one, and I think this one might play double duty for two of the questions that I paid quite a bit for on eBay, is the Tildwick Tarot. I got this not too long ago, so it was after it went out of print, and since that time when you find it on eBay, it tends to go for a significant amount, and it's one that I knew I wanted, and I think it might be coming back into print now, but I'm happy with the price I paid for it. It was a chunk of change, but I'm glad I have it now. So this one was pretty expensive for me as well. Although when it was in print, I know it was pretty reasonably priced. So my least expensive deck, I don't have any decks that are super inexpensive. I've seen a few people have decks that you kind of get in those packages sometimes. I don't think I have any like that, and I can't remember exactly what my least expensive deck quite was, but I know along those lines, I think it was pretty much just what my Centennial Rider-Waite-Smith. I know I got this from a store, and the store was like very reasonably priced. They had a sale, so this actual specific Centennial edition I paid only a few dollars for, so it is, I believe, my most inexpensive deck. That's a short story for that one. And then the deck other collectors want to steal from your collection. So I do like vintage decks and decks that are out of print, so I kind of went through a few, and I think there are a few that I've had questions about if I'm going to sell, but I kind of based this on inquiries I've received from others, as far as like when I show the deck, if there's somebody who maybe emails and asks about it. So the deck that I've had the most asked about after I've spoken about it is the Masonic Symbolic Tarot. This one is from the 80s, and it's out of print. It's a sort of Marseille-esque inspired. It's more of just a pip deck, actually. It's not Marseille at all. But it's a beautiful deck. It's out of print. It's been out of print for quite some time, and I know it goes for quite a bit on eBay or just various sites, so I understand the appeal, and it is one of my favorite decks. So, but yes, it's the one that I think a lot of people have asked about, so that's why I would choose it for that question. I think it's the one other collectors would want. Following that, we have my Strangest Deck. Okay, I have a bunch of strange decks. The one I'm going to show, to me personally, is the strangest, and I think it may just be, of course, these are all subjective questions. They're based on what we think of our own collections, but the one, and I've shown this before, it is the New Age Tarot, or it wasn't originally in English, so I'm not going to try to pronounce the name. It's the New Age Tarot by Walter Webb. This one. It is a vintage deck. I think it's from the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. And it is somewhat based on the Rider-Waite-Smith. I think the majors especially are, but the minors definitely aren't. The faces are just so strange. The scenes are strange. There's this like creepy surrealism about it. It feels just odd and off. And then the minors really don't seem to coincide with any sort of system that has ever been established that I know of. So that's very interesting. The majors, for example, like this Hermit to me seems a bit more traditional. Of course, they've added in some elements that make it feel like I'm hallucinating, but so the majors, and then the courts are a little weird, but mostly the minors is where it gets like extremely weird. What is this? Oh wait, no, this is a court card. We have the Knight of Wands. So yeah, there are a lot of hands and eyes. Some of it gets to the point of being just pretty creepy. And then another big thing about it that makes it extra strange, in my opinion, is the guidebook and what it speaks to and how it talks about the cards. It's very strange. Just for an example, I know I've spoken about this deck before, but the Three of Swords, dance of the earth, the sun and the moon, battle of the earth, an eternal process of life and death, light, shadow, an eternal reincarnation. The 3 swords represent the 3 dimensions of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. A welcome visit from a woman. Fertility, a key position can be obtained. Educational courses are completed. Pay attention to the animal world. Nature is well disposed. And then a reversed, no luck in the garden, a malicious visitor, political defeat, exclusion from a circle of friends, bad harvest, and circulatory problems. So they're all very strange and practical, but they're very specific. It's a bunch of very specific meanings for each card that don't quite make sense with the image or any system, and then the actual various points that they're trying to make don't seem connected at all. So it's an odd deck, and when I use it, I actually do like to reference the guidebook, because sometimes it's really funny and fitting and poignant or something along those lines. So to me, it is a very strange deck, and I love it. It just feels like it's like a joke. Not a joke, I use it pretty seriously, but it feels like it's making jokes when I use it. So there's that, and that is the New Age Tarot. So the next question is the deck other collectors are least likely to have in their collection. So this one I didn't really have to think much about. This is one that I saw on, I think it was eBay a while ago. I don't know even how I came across it. It's all in Italian, so I'm going to mispronounce this. I Tarocchi Celtici. It is supposed to be a Celtic-inspired deck, but it's all in Italian. And then I think that this is it might be from the 80s. I forget what decade it was published in, but it comes in this sort of magnetic closure, and then it's like an odd opening. So then it opens even further, and then you slide it out. So you get a little book, and then here are the cards. I've just never heard this spoken of or seen it on any other channel, and trying to Google it and figure things out, I had no luck. And there's no translation of this book, and it's all in Italian, which is unfortunate. But this is not a deck I use all that much. It is a really beautiful deck, though, so I'll show you. This is the guide. Wait, there's one of the cards that I'm dropping. I'm dropping everything. All right, so this is the guidebook. It's all in Italian, so I'm not going to show it. I won't be able to read from it to you or read anything from it, but the cards are sort of that old tarot style. It's very thick, rough, cardboardy, sort of like literal paper. There's no lamination. It's thick. It reminds me of those, what is it? Well, it reminds me of old Marseille decks. It's pointy cards. The edges are not rounded, and it's sort of almost like tea-stained on the backs, and they're just plain, but it's very much literal dry paper, just thick dry paper. And all of them have a sort of knotwork around the borders, and the images are very, very interesting. So of course it's Italian, but it's meant to be based on Celtic mythologies. So there are gods and goddesses a lot of the times in the majors, and then a lot of the minors feature more like sprite-like creatures or fairies or the fae in some ways. And I know that the correspondences are very different from any system that exists. As far as astrology, they've mixed all of those up, the creator has, and the artwork is it's different. It's actually very beautiful, but it's very different, and it doesn't quite fit with meanings so much that I can find, or traditional meanings from certain systems. And you see major figures from Celtic mythology featured, but written in Italian, of course. So, but you have like these minors, which is this, and it's also harder to tell because they're numbered from 1 to 78, and so it won't tell you like 4 of Wands. It won't say something like that, or it might, but it's just in Italian. And then there are symbols in the corners which relate to various things as well. And the sort of borders change on a decent amount of the cards. Same for the color tones. The paper color changes for different suits sometimes. So you'll have certain ones that are like blue and some that are more yellow. It's just a very odd deck, and I've never seen it listed since I bought it, and I've never seen or heard it spoken about. So to me, this is my strangest deck, or not the strangest deck, the one that wow, I can't speak today. The one that people are most likely to have in their collection. If you have it, let me know. I'd be very curious. And if you are able to read the guidebook or have a translation of it, definitely let me know, because I would love to take a look. So next we have my oldest deck, or the deck that I've had the longest. So I've just picked the deck that I've had the longest, because if I picked oldest deck, I would probably be looking for the oldest vintage deck I have, which is probably actually that Thoth deck from the beginning, from the 60s. But the first deck that I have, and I'm going to now reach over and get it, because they're getting farther away from me now. I actually still have the very first deck I ever bought, or acquired, or worked with, or owned, and it is a copy of just the Rider-Waite-Smith, the plaid backs. I got this 6 or 7 years ago, I think. And yes, this is the very first one. I never got rid of it. This is not just a repurchasing, no. This is the actual physical first deck I ever had. And I still use it sometimes. There's a sentimental connection there. If I really feel like I want to get back to my roots, or maybe I feel like I'm losing sight of what it is that I'm doing with tarot, I will use this in a reading for myself. I don't tend to use it for others. It feels kind of special and sacred to me now because it was my first deck. But yes, I keep it and love it, and this was the first one for me. And it's the only one I had for about 4 years, so we have a bond, and I keep it in this sort of pouch. So the next question is my newest deck. What is the newest deck I have acquired? And for me, well, I guess I picked the newest tarot deck that I've acquired. I have been acquiring some playing card decks because I've been studying that, but as far as tarot goes, because this is a tarot collector tag, it is this edition of the Thoth that the lovely Hanny from Fierce and Pretty sent me along with this bag. This is the Finnish Thoth, so it is not in English. I showed this in my recap from, I think, last month, and it's absolutely lovely. The coloration is beautiful for those who like Thoth decks. It is a rescanning or sort of a recopying of the Thoth in more modern times, so the coloration is thought to be a bit more true to the actual paintings. So I find that very fascinating as well, to see if we take the technology that we have pretty much right now and were to go back to Lady Frieda Harris's original prints or paintings, what it would look like, how it would come out as a deck. So I really enjoy this. The cardstock's beautiful, and it's really meaningful to me now because Hanny sent it to me and she's a good friend. So yeah, this is my newest deck in my collection. So the question we have after that is the deck that made me want to collect decks in the first place. And for me, that was, well, it's a little bit of a funny story. It's really just the second deck I ever acquired. So the deck that really started the collection was, in my eyes, the first one that turned me into a collector. Having one deck to me I didn't feel like a collector at the time. And then once I had a second deck, that was something I might have associated myself with, or a title I would have thought to tie to myself. So I keep it in this bag, and it is the Wildwood Tarot. This was the second deck I ever owned, purchased, acquired in any sort of way. This is actually the exact edition that I purchased. So I got it about, 4 or so years after that plaid-back Rider-Waite-Smith. So before and leading up to this, I just didn't think that there were any other decks really out there, or that there couldn't have been too many and that I wouldn't like them, so I never went and looked. I really just studied tarot from books, so I didn't go online and find the tarot community to see that there were more decks, or I didn't search really anything related to tarot to see that there were more decks. And I forget what really started this. I think I was reading a book that mentioned using other decks, and so it made me curious, and then I went online and started to look at other decks and felt very connected to the artwork, and so I decided to get it. And then from there, it was a slippery slope, and I wound up kind of going down the rabbit hole and just collecting very quickly, I guess, especially at the start. I know we all have those periods, or a lot of us can resonate with periods where we kind of have binge collected decks and just gone for them very, very quickly, and that sort of is what happened after I got this one. So there was a period of a lot of decks being collected following the Wildwood. But yeah, this is the deck that started the collecting for me. So our final question, the final question, is my favorite tarot deck from my collection. So as of right now, it is a bit of a tie, or a three-way tie. I have the one that has already been spoken of in this tag, the Masonic Symbolic Tarot by Jean Bouchard, I believe is how, I'm not sure how you say their name. But yes, I absolutely love this deck. I use it all the time. I really just use this one for myself, but there's something about it that just feels so practical and magical, and it really does it all for me. I think the idea of the correspondences and the connection to Freemasonry as a sort of secret society, all of it just, to me, it really pokes at and engenders my feelings of wonder and whimsy, and the subject matter of the deck is one that I am personally very interested in, so it does, that helps. And then, of course, there is the beautiful artwork, and I actually really enjoy the pips, but the majors are stunning. If I could have prints of every single one, I would be really happy. So this is one of my favorites. And then another favorite that has been in and out for most of my time collecting, and as soon as I got it, it was an immediate favorite. It is the Tarot of the Alchemical Magnum Opus by Robert M. Place. I'm a big Robert M. Place fan. I do like pretty much all of his decks, and I have a decent amount of them. But this one for me takes the cake as far as reading goes. This is the one that I will turn to for readings for myself and others the most out of all of them. I think that the more limited style of the pips and the imagery, it's very minimalistic. To me, it feels clean. It allows me to work a little bit more intuitively. The scene, there's not really much of a scene going on in most of them, in most of these cards. I like how it's just enough. So that's why I like it. It feels like it's just enough. And I think there's a bit of a theme with more pip-style decks here. Pip-style decks that are not Marseille and that are a little bit more illustrated than just what you would think of a traditional pip deck. And this box, while I love these boxes, it's nearly impossible to get these cards back in because they fit so tightly. And then the final deck that is my favorite, and this one, of course, will be no surprise, is a Thoth deck. But the one that I chose for my favorite one is the greenie that I have from the, I believe this is one of the ones that was printed in the 80s. And it's one that I just got used, and it's damaged, it's worn. I've spoken about this. It has some cards that are warped from water, and there's something about it that I absolutely love. And I've traveled with it, and this is just the one that I use the most for my daily draws for clients when I'm not using my trimmed Thoth. So this really is just it for me. I mean, the Thoth deck in general is my favorite deck, but then of all of my editions of the Thoth, this is the one I use the most and probably love the most. The card stock and the coloration of this exact edition is just perfect for me, so it is the Thoth Greenie from the 80s, that is my favorite deck probably, with the other two being just under it. So that, I think, concludes all the questions. I really enjoyed the opportunity to go through my collection and reflect as I was sort of purging and taking decks out that I want to move on, so this was the perfect opportunity. I really enjoyed Moon Baby's original video, of course, so that'll all be linked down below. Go check his out, and I'm looking forward to watching a bunch more. I know that there are many responses to this, so it's really fun to see what others are collecting and what they enjoy and how their tarot journey has sort of been in terms of deck collecting. So I hope you are all well. Like and subscribe if this was fun or interesting, and until next time, bye.